go deep with early quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end rankings this week. We continue on here. We're going with running backs. Dave, you and I put together our redraft fantasy rankings to create a small consensus. 2 people, rankings with tiers. You could use this for best ball. You could just track the hype of the season. Maybe you start to gain an early advantage on some of your league mates. But now we're going to jump into our top 38 running back rankings. That's right, 38. Went a little bit past 36 here. Let's start with our first tier, Dave. In the first tier at number 1, we've got Christian McCaffrey. Duh. There's no analysis needed there. At 2 and 3, we've got a tie between Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall. And that is the end of this first tier. So let's do this, Dave. Why don't you, because you're higher on Breece, I'm higher on Bijan. Why don't you, and not that this is a big deal, guys, okay? Like it's running back 2 and 3. Like both of these guys have equal opportunity of being the running back number 1 overall. They're both first round picks. There's just going to be a point of preference here. So, Dave, why don't you make your case for Breece Hall as the running back 2 overall?
I mean, last year he was coming off an ACL tear and only Christian McCaffrey outscored him. Like, that is just absolutely mind-blowing. And we saw him leave a lot on the field early in the season when he had some breakaway runs that he couldn't finish because his conditioning wasn't there. I mean, he still, despite the great season he had as the RB2, left some points on the field. I mean, what we saw last year coming back from that ACL injury, I don't think we've ever seen since Adrian Peterson did it, over a decade ago. It was that impressive. And now all of a sudden we're looking at an ecosystem that should be a little bit better with Aaron Rodgers under center. Breece Hall, so much of his value, like a lot of elite running backs, you could say the same thing about Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs and Christian McCaffrey, but so much of his upside comes in the receiving game. He had a 17% target share last year, which was 4th among all running backs. And I think we see that go up even a little bit more. Aaron Rodgers, at this point in his career, at 40 years old, we're not going to see him scrambling, buying time, running around, throwing the ball deep downfield. I think this offense is going to be predicated on getting the ball out of his hand as quickly as possible. And the beneficiaries of that are going to be Breece Hall, who is wide open in the flat all the time. I think them going out and making a reasonable investment in Malachi Corley. We saw how excited they were. I think the reason they want to bring in a guy like Corley is because he also does a lot of his work near the line of scrimmage. And then, of course, you got Garrett Wilson, who gets open immediately off the line. I think we're going to see a lot of, dare I say it, dink and dunks in this Jets offense. I don't think we're going to see Rodgers airing it out all over the place. So for me, driving a little bit down narrative street here, but I just think that we're going to see even more passing game usage for Breece Hall. So for me, with him getting drafted right now, typically around the 7 to 9 range, he's one of my favorite values right now because I think that he could easily finish as this year's RB1, and you don't have to draft him number 1 overall like you have to with Christian McCaffrey.
I think for both of these guys, there's a ton of projection going on here, right? There's a lot of us saying they could be
You could
this
say
guy.
everything I just said about Rodgers, you could say about Kirk Cousins coming off the Achilles injury. Like he's going to be dinking and dunking. Yeah, so
exactly. I'll skip that part for Bijan. But the talent is there for both of these guys. The situation is there for both of these guys. We could play on the narrative back and forth, right? Like I go the other way in terms of the targets for Breece Hall. I do think that he'll get targeted a little bit less because this isn't Tim Boyle and Zach Wilson. They do go out and get Malachi Corley, and we're hanging on to those final 5 games of the season where everything was like incredibly good for Breece in terms of the receiving game. Now Bijan, I think we have less to hang on to. This is still us holding on to a guy that was an incredible prospect, and we're saying and we're thinking that this is a guy who's going to get the Todd Gurley role that was in the Rams offense for so many years. And I get it. It's all projection. But for me, Bijan becomes a legit RB1 overall candidate in Zach Robinson's offense. There's going to be more scoring opportunity, I believe, than last year. Bijan can be that Todd Gurley role where he's getting 19 or 21 touchdowns. That was back-to-back seasons, by the way, for Todd Gurley. Absolutely nuts. That was Zach Robinson's first seasons. His first 2 seasons on staff with Sean McVay were those MVP-type seasons for Todd Gurley. And then the stat that just keeps going around, and by the way, big credit to Ryan Heath over on Twitter. Make sure you give him a follow. He pointed out only 27% of Atlanta's red zone rushing attempts went to Bijan Robinson last year. Absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts that you spend that high draft capital.
Royce Freeman had a bigger rushing share in the red zone for his team last year than Bijan Robinson did.
Thanks for pulling that out.
Yeah.
Thanks. Just 4 touchdowns for Bijan Robinson. This is a guy that can absolutely take over this Atlanta Falcons offense. Every time you see an interview with either Terry Fontenot or Zach Robinson or head coach Raheem Morris, they are just gushing about Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. I think we're finally going to get what we want from these players. And even though they made the selection of Michael Penix, I do think this team understands they need to win now, or Terry Fontenot might not have a job much longer. And Raheem Morris is getting his second turn at being a head coach. He's got to win. This is not something that can be a slow play. Arthur Blank is looking very, very impatient at the moment. Well, guys, I want to remind you, there are a ton of ways to enjoy our show, whether it's listening to the audio podcast or watching on YouTube. And guess what? We've got our new YouTube channel, youtube.com/footballguysfantasy. That's going to be in the description of the podcast and in the comments down below here on the channel, just in case, you're already here. You don't have to go and click that link. You can just click the subscribe button underneath the video, a little secret. So if you're already watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with your friends, leave a comment telling us which ranking you love or hate. You guys are idiots for having Breece and Bijan that high. They should be even higher. Haha, see what I did there? Or listen, if you prefer, I just want to put this in my ear, in my headphones, walk around, listen to this while I'm doing other stuff. That's great too. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast over on Apple or Spotify. After you listen to this episode, just leave a quick review, 5 stars preferably, and let us know what you love or what you didn't like about the episode. And we just love that feedback. It's so appreciated. Let's go down to our next tier, Dave. Tier number 2 starts with Jonathan Taylor at 4, 5 Jahmyr Gibbs, 6 Saquon Barkley, and 7 Travis Etienne. And this is sickening, this tier, because you and I agreed on every single running back in this tier.
And lockstep, how about it?
I'm going to vomit. I hate this. I hate who we are.
I think we agree a lot more on redraft content. I think a lot of the butting heads are just kind of in different philosophies and how we play Dynasty. But when redraft season rolls around, I think you and I kind of view the game in a very similar lens.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Let's take a look at number 6, though. Saquon Barkley is RB6 for us, and I think we both agree, and I'm going to speak for both of us, and maybe I'm wrong, but Saquon Barkley was paid like a top 4 running back. And I don't think you just pay Saquon Barkley this much money, invest in the running game, and then say, you know what, let's get Kenneth Gainwell out there. Let's keep giving him some touches. No, you don't. I don't think you're going to be running the tush push as much as before either. Like you mentioned, Jason Kelce is gone. They bring in Saquon to be that guy that can finish drives at the goal line. I think the Eagles are going to be, we know the Eagles are a massive upgrade in terms of run blocking, scoring opportunity for Saquon. I think this is just one of those just very obvious situations where an incredibly talented player gets put in a very good situation. And a lot of people might still be overthinking it because they're remembering all the bad times that Saquon had on the Giants, on that terrible offense, or the injuries that have happened. But Dave, put it on a t-shirt, because there's a world where Saquon Barkley could actually be the running back 1 overall again. And I think you have to think that way when you're drafting running backs this high. When they're in this tier, you're picking these guys because you're saying, I can get them at a value and they could still be RB1 overall.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to push back on there. I think the injuries are the main reason that people are concerned here. And obviously, what Jalen Hurts does near the goal line is a little bit concerning as well. But we talked about this again. I feel like I keep like referencing things that we've talked about earlier in the season, but a lot of the redraft or a lot of the dynasty discussion we've had over the last couple of months is applicable to what we're talking about now in redraft season. And I remember like when this first broke and they said Saquon Barkley is going to the Eagles, my gut reaction was, ugh, that's disgusting. You can poke holes in all of the reason that Saquon Barkley can't do well, but then you look at it and like DeAndre Swift was pretty good last year. And if you go back 2 years ago, Miles Sanders was pretty good as well. Like Miles Sanders was scoring touchdowns and rushing and catching passes. And we saw from DeAndre Swift last year too. So I think the gut reaction and what people want to believe is that Jalen Hurts is kryptonite to fantasy quarterback or to fantasy running backs, but we've seen lesser talents still be productive in Philadelphia. This is by far the best running back that they've had in the Jalen Hurts era. So yeah, I think that we're both pretty sharp to have him at RB6.
We are sharp. Thanks, Mom. We're smart young men. All right, let's take a look at tier number 3 We kick it off with Kyren Williams at running back 8. At 9, Derrick Henry. At 10, Isiah Pacheco. 11, Josh Jacobs. 12, Ken Walker. And at 13, Rachaad White. And this still feels very on consensus. We have not strayed away too far from what the rankings are. We do have a little bit of dissension here in the ranks. Now, I have Derrick Henry as my running back 8. You got him at running back 11. What is that for you? Is that mostly just he's old and you don't want to bet
Ugh,
on an old running back on a new team?
man, I'm so conflicted on Derrick Henry. I really am because he has top 3 running back in his range of outcomes this year, and you
Yeah.
could also just completely see the wheels fall off. So I'm really conflicted on where to rank him, and I've got him at RB11. On one hand, I can totally nerd out and start talking about the analytics and the efficiency metrics. His rushing yards over expectation, his yards per carry, his broken tackle rate, his yards after contact per attempt have all been trending down for 3 straight seasons. But probably doesn't matter. At the end of the day, like volume matters. Being on a good offense matters. And I think that we can project both of those things to go in Derrick Henry's favor. I talked about it on the episode earlier when we were talking about quarterbacks that Lamar Jackson doesn't get the same treatment near the green zone, like inside the 5 yard line that we see from Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. They just line him up under center and he hands the ball off. And Derrick Henry is going to be getting a bunch of green zone touches with Patrick Ricard as his lead blocker. This is an offense last year that
Just hearing
Gus,
you say that, Derrick Henry and Patrick Ricard running together is
how do you stop that?
absolutely terrifying.
How do you stop it?
That's like a bus being led by an 18-wheeler. It's just
Yeah,
nuts.
it's going to be really, really hard to stop. And last year, Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards scored 13
Preach,
touchdowns in this offense. If Gus
preach.
Edwards can score 13 touchdowns, I'm pretty sure Derrick Henry can score 13 touchdowns as well. So this is an obvious upgrade from what we've seen over the last couple of years in Tennessee. Better offensive line. Derrick Henry might not be the player he was 3, 4, 5 years ago. Um, but for me, it's going to come down to ADP. If he's getting drafted as a back end RB1, I'm more than happy to take him there. It's just tough to move him up in the rankings because of the age, because of the dwindling efficiency, because of the new scenery and all that. Like I said, I'm conflicted. Like I feel like he could be my RB6, could be my RB15. I kind of just copped out and put him in the middle. He's a tough player to rank this year, but I don't want to miss out, and I'll probably be drafting him at cost.
For me, the big thing is that even if the wheels do fall off, Baltimore can't go anywhere else. They don't really have anything else. They have Keaton Mitchell, who's recovering from an injury, and then that's about it on the depth chart. They didn't go and draft anyone high. John Harbaugh was already asked, "What's this offense going to look like with Derrick Henry?" And he said, "Hey, did you see him in Tennessee? That's what it's going to look like. It's going to be him getting a ton of carries." And for me, like that's the big thing with this Baltimore offense is that their weapons that they currently have get a big boost because they didn't really add anyone in the draft. They have this strong offensive line, a strong running game. You already mentioned the Gus Edwards thing, so I won't bring that up again. But Derrick Henry was running back 8 last year on a team that was a lot worse,
Mhm.
that had a lot less scoring opportunity. Now let's go and put him on a good running team. This to me is very similar to Saquon going to Philly. Just Derrick Henry's a little bit older, but he hasn't had the same injuries that Saquon has had. So I'm keeping them pretty close. I've got Saquon at 6. I've got Derrick Henry at running back 8. I love Derrick Henry this year, and I can't fade him. The way that you're saying you're conflicted, I'm just putting that wall up, that barrier. I can't say no to Derrick Henry when he's there at running back 10 or 11 in a draft. It's crazy for me. Let's go to the next guy here on the list. At number 10, Isiah Pacheco. And this is the guy you have ahead of Derrick Henry. You've got him as your running back 9. I've got him at running back 10, just behind him. Talk to me about Isiah Pacheco because we're both actually pretty high on Isiah Pacheco compared to consensus.
Yeah,
And the Chiefs did not add anyone else. We're going into this again, Pacheco and CEH, and they're minus Jerick McKinnon. So
exactly.
this just looks really good for him.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people faded him last year because they said, the lack of draft capital, he's going to
Right.
lose his job, and it hasn't happened. Like he took over this backfield at the midway point of 2022 and hasn't really looked back. You look at the opportunity last year, 8th in the league in opportunity share, 7th in the league in red zone carries, and it's not like he's doing this on a bad offense. He's doing this for the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, he's getting a huge chunk of the pie on the league's best offense, and he's still just 25 years old with less backfield competition than he had before. The one kind of knock you could put on his game and his ability to score fantasy points is the lack of receiving work. Like, he does get a little bit, but not as much as we want to see to put him ahead of some of the elite guys up here. And that does make his week to week consistency a little bit shaky, but it's so hard when you start looking at projections and who's going to finish where to imagine a world where Isiah Pacheco doesn't finish as a top 12 running back this year. Like, he is getting a huge chunk of work on a great offense. He's going to score a bunch. He's going to get a bunch of rushing yards. What's not to like?
There's a world. There's a world where Isiah Pacheco, top 8 running back, maybe top 5 running back.
Let's hope so, because I got him ranked as RB9. So the top 8 finish would make me look pretty smart.
All right, let's get to number 11 here, and it's Josh Jacobs. You've got him at 10. I've got him at running back 12. Okay.
I did not expect to be higher on Jacobs than you. That's surprising.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's do this.
Wow.
Josh Jacobs has been pretty inefficient over the last few seasons. And I think a lot of people are looking at him going to Green Bay and thinking, great, he's going to get a ton of touches. And that's been good for Josh Jacobs in the past. His success has been totally predicated on volume. 21 touches per game in 2023, 23 touches per game in 2022, 18 touches per game in 2021. Now let's take a look at Aaron Jones, who has been on the Packers. His career average touches per game, 16. He's never been in that realm of 18, 20, 23 touches per game as a running back on the Packers. We also know that's not Matt LaFleur's style. Even in Tennessee with the aforementioned Derrick Henry, the guy who can handle the volume, he still used Dion Lewis a ton of the time. Like, it was frustrating. A 52-48% touch split between Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis when Matt LaFleur was running the Tennessee Titans offense. Now you get the Packers bringing in Marshawn Lloyd, who I was very high on in the pre-draft process. And I don't love the landing spot, but this is a guy that they have said they want to use Marshawn Lloyd in the passing game. They want to use him to create explosive plays. And explosive plays, the exact opposite of what Josh Jacobs has been giving us for the last 3 seasons here. It really is. And I even just pulled up some Josh Jacobs film just to be like, man, is he washed? Is he just not good anymore? And there are so many instances of him wanting to bounce things outside, and he just can't beat defenders to the outside anymore. There's times where he's just running into the backs of his offensive linemen. I'm not saying that you need to totally fade Josh Jacobs, because I still have him as running back 12. And I think that the investment the Packers have made is sound. They're going to use him plenty. It's a good offense. He'll get scoring opportunity. I just don't want to overdraft him. I don't want to take him where most people are, which is closer to like running back 8. I'll take him as the last guy in this tier as my running back 12, if need be.
Yeah. I think Josh Jacobs is the perfect, like, you need 3.5 yards, he's going to get you 3.5 yards. And if you need 1 yard, he's going to get you 3.5 yards. And if you need 5 yards, he's going to get you 3.5 yards. Like, that's just what he does, is he gets the ball and he slams into his line and he keeps his legs churning and then he falls over. He's not the first round talent that he was drafted to be years ago. I think the one thing I'd push back on a little bit, and maybe why I've got him a few spots higher than you, is because Aaron Jones, he's just not really made to be a third down back. He's smaller. He's got a slighter frame. He's made to be more of a change of pace guy. If you look at Josh Jacobs' profile, he's over 220 pounds. He's a big boy. I think he's more built.
You mean he's not meant to be an early down back? You said he's not meant to be a third down back.
Oh, I meant to say 3 down back is what I meant to say. Like Josh Jacobs, because he can catch the ball as well. We've seen him pull a reasonable target share. So I think that's the only thing I'd push back a little bit is Josh Jacobs is more built to handle a bigger workload. So maybe we see a slight change in offensive philosophy. But I will say, like, the addition of Marshawn Lloyd probably requires me to reevaluate my stance a little bit, because I don't think that they drafted Lloyd just to sit him on the bench and wait until 2025. This is the team that has deployed a 2-down or a 2-back committee for the last, 10, 15 years? Like, it's just kind of in the Packers' DNA at this point.
The thing that stood out to me was that you already had A.J. Dillon on your team. And you had a guy who was familiar with your system, who's been your RB2 for years and years, and you still felt that you needed to go and draft a guy early in the draft despite running back not being a pressing need. So it's those things where the front office decisions really start to tell us a bit and make us read the tea leaves. And by the way, with the weight thing, Derrick Henry is as big as a house, and he was still splitting time with another running back. So
Yeah.
I think it's just a philosophy thing. That's what worries me. Let's finish out this tier here at 12. Ken Walker, the third, and at 13, Rachaad White. And we'll talk more about those guys. They have running backs that are behind them that could push them for snaps as well. Let's just get to the next tier. At 14, we got Joe Mixon. 15, James Cook. 16, Devon Achane, probably surprising to a lot of people. At 17, Alvin Kamara. 18, David Montgomery. 19, Zamir White. Oh, so excited for Zamir White. And at 20, James Conner. This tier feels like this is going to be the running back dead zone this year. Does that feel about right to you, Dave? Mixon, Cook, Achane, or are we not there yet? Is that going to be the next
Yes
tier?
and no. Yes and no. So I think the thing is, like, historically, the running back dead zone used to be like in the third round. Now people have kind of gotten savvy to the running back dead zone, and these guys are getting pushed into the fifth, sixth, seventh round. And at that point, I think the running back dead zone is very much so alive. Like, before, you were passing on top 12, top 15 wide receivers to draft these guys. Now, all of a sudden, with the way ADP is shaken out and with these running backs getting suppressed in value, you could draft Joe Mixon as your RB1 after you've already drafted 3 wide receivers, or you can draft Joe Mixon as your RB3. Same thing with Alvin Kamara and Zamir White. Zamir White's going all the way in like round 8 right now in best ball.
I'm pulling it up right now to see. I just did a draft the other day, a mock draft, redraft with the guys over at CBS Fantasy, and I drafted Zamir White. I'm going to pull that up and tell you where I got him.
Well, I've been getting him in Underdog in the 7th and 8th round. That is where he's going in Underdog right now. So I can't say it's the running back dead zone when you're potentially drafting this guy after you could get 3 wide receivers, you can get an elite tight end, you can get 2 running backs, and then get Zamir White as your RB3. Whew.
Yeah, I ended up okay. I got Zamir White in round 7, but I
Yeah,
got him. I
crazy.
got him after Aaron Jones, after Tony
Yeah.
Pollard, because running backs were going early in this draft. And listen, we saw what Zamir White can do. I think he's going to be everyone's
Good.
favorite sleeper as the summer goes on, and he's going to be
He
the guy
pretty much
that
do everything Josh Jacobs can. I'm just gonna say it.
yes,
Like, that offense didn't miss a beat. When Josh Jacobs went out, Zamir White stepped in. It was like, oh, this is the same exact offense. Like, you can't tell the two of them apart on the field.
yes, it's and like listen, I think right now consensus is behind because Zamir White's a bit lower in the rankings. He's closer to like running back 24, 25. I've even seen some people putting him still at like running back 28, and I just don't know what we're doing at that point. I've got him at 18. I get that might be high to some people. You've got him at 20. He averages out to running back 19 for us. I think the Alexander Madison signing for the Raiders was perfect. Perfect because he can be a backup, but he is not a legitimate threat. I mean, we've seen that for years. Even as a starter, he was not a legitimate threat to anyone. He got overtaken by Ty Chandler, who was immediately replaced this year by Aaron Jones. The Raiders go out, they draft Jackson Powers Johnson. A lot of people thought he might go in the first round. That's their new center. And then round 6, all they really did was draft I'm going to do this, a scrappy gym rat type running back, a Danny Woodhead type Dylan Lobby out of, I believe it's New Hampshire or Rhode Island, one of those.
And he's
They
just gonna
didn't
take the
really
Amir
add much.
Abdullah role. Like, that's not
Yeah,
yeah.
there's nothing that is taking anything away from Zamir White. In those final 4 weeks, he was averaging 23 touches per game. If there was a running back that I could tell you and guarantee you that he's going to get 20 plus touches per game, we'd be all drafting him a lot higher. He was running back 19 or better in each game that he started, excuse me. And I think the biggest factor here, Dave, that we're all overlooking, he changed his number. He is now number 3, which that's just cool.
Sex. Love it.
Hashtag sex. All right, let's get to the next tier here. We go
One
to
last thing I want to say. I'm not ready to get off Zamir White yet because I love this guy. He was my favorite.
well, you
pick
just said
last year.
sex, so I figured that was the end.
I had more exposure to Zamir White last year in drafts than any other player. Like, absolutely love this guy. And I think a lot of people are just worried. I'm just saying it because you mentioned running back dead zone. And I feel like that's like what a lot of people are saying is like, this is a guy that we're projecting volume on, but is the offense going to be good? Is he going to be good? He is good. And I think that's
this
what
is not Alexander Madison from last year.
Exactly. And I think that's what gets lost here so much because there are a lot of guys that maybe aren't good that we project volume on, and we ended up holding the bag midseason when that volume just disappears. But Zamir White is good. There's no reason he should lose this role. He could be a workhorse for an entire 18-week season. Okay,
I
we
think
can
that what
move on
we
now. That's
I think well,
I
I think
love
what we
Zamir White, man. I'm going to keep talking about this guy.
dude, I'm in. I'm in. I got him ranked even higher, one spot higher. So what's up? I like him more. But what I'm going to say here is I think that what happens is you get people drafting in fantasy, they get those Sunday scaries, right? Like they did that one thing happened last year, so it's probably going to happen again this year, right? Alexander Madison got opportunity, he wasn't good. It could happen to Zamir White, or Anthony Richardson got hurt. Trey Lance didn't start. Trey Lance wasn't good. Jaden Daniels, he's not going to be good. Like we got to stop doing this thing where we compare previous players to the next. Every single player is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. Skill sets are always different. Like just give everything the context it needs. It's lazy when we do that. All right, I said my piece. I'm getting off my soapbox, going to the next tier. At 21, we got Rhamondre Stevenson. 22, DeAndre Swift. 23, Aaron Jones. 24, Najee Harris. 25, Tony Pollard. 26, Javonte Williams. 27, Brian Robinson Jr. And at 28, Raheem Mostert. Dave, at 21, you wanted to talk about Rhamondre Stevenson. And you know what? Both of us, I think the same here. We were not in on Rhamondre last year,
Nope.
but we're looking
Got a
at this now
lot
and
of
we're
flack
saying,
for it too. I want to say like we stood our ground when
that's
everybody
right.
was telling us that we were fools for draft or for fading Rhamondre Stevenson when he was getting drafted as like RB8 last year.
You were the fools. We're not fools. So yeah, Rhamondre here at running back 21. The value just seems to be too good. Not worried about Antonio Gibson. They're bringing in the Cleveland Browns running game essentially with Alex Van Pelt. I
Mhm.
keep saying good things about Rhamondre Stevenson.
Yeah, I mean, when ADPs change, so should your takes on players.
Yeah.
And I was appalled that people were drafting Rhamondre Stevenson in the second round last year. But now you're telling me that I can get the same player in an arguably better situation in round 10? Yeah, sign me up. I'm going to draft some Rhamondre Stevenson this year. And just talking from like a kind of game theory standpoint, like these are the running backs that I love. All of the guys that we talked about in the tier above, all the guys we're talking about in the tier now and in
Yeah.
the next tier. I think that we're really good at projecting wide receivers. And if you're in round one and, Christian McCaffrey falls in your lap at 3 or 4, go for it. If you're at the end of the first round and you can get Breece or Bijan, go for it. But I'm passing up on a lot of the round 2, round 3, round 4 guys and waiting because this just seems like the area where you just want to absolutely shred running backs in your draft and just stockpile these guys. Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Zamir White, Rhamondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, a lot of the guys that we're talking about right now. And like we said, Rhamondre Stevenson last year was getting drafted way too highly, but I don't see Antonio Gibson as any more of a threat to his workload than Ezekiel Elliott was last year. Stevenson was also hurt last year, and I think that gets lost a lot in the dissection of his 2023 season. I don't think he's ever going to be the stud that we had hoped for after his rookie season, where he was just had eye popping efficiency across the board. He might not be that guy, but at the end of the day, he still gets volume. And that's what we want, especially for these late round running backs that we're drafting. He saw double digit touches in 8 of 11 full games that he played last year. He saw multiple targets in every single game and averaged 4.5 targets per game. Like there aren't a lot of other guys that you're going to be drafting this late in drafts this year that are going to have that sort of workload, both on the ground and through the air. So I'm not a huge fan of the talent, but he projects to get a meaningful workload this year. So I'm willing to go back to the well. And whether I'm drafting him as my RB4 or RB5 in a running back heavy approach, or if I'm just going like completely zero running back and waiting until around 8, 9, or 10 and drafting Rhamondre as my RB1 with a slew of other high upside guys, Rhamondre Stevenson works in just about any build this year.
And you mentioned the offensive situation might be even better. I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is because you're not having to worry about trying to develop Mac Jones. You're not worried
Thank
about
you. Yeah.
potentially starting Bailey Zappi. You've got a Cleveland Browns style offense with, guess what? The guy who actually started on the Cleveland Browns, Jacoby Brissett, coming in. And that may not be long. It might be 4 games, 6 games, whatever it is. But then you get Drake May coming in.
I'm willing
And
to say
Drake
Drake May is
May,
going to be better than Mac Jones was. I'll just say it. I
yeah,
don't even need
yeah,
to see him taking an NFL snap. Famous last words, it can't get worse.
oh man, you did it. I'll take the L, honestly. If Drake May
Yeah.
is worse than Mac Jones, I'll take a fat L on that. But I'm going May over Jones there. Let's keep moving on here. Running back 22 was DeAndre Swift. 23 was Aaron Jones. 24, Najee Harris. And then at 25, Dave, you have Tony Pollard as a guy that you wanted to talk about. You've got him ranked 24. I've got him 26. So I've got him just outside of my top, outside my running back 2 zone. And I think a lot of that is just Tyjae Spears being there. I don't feel comfortable with Will Levis. I don't feel comfortable with the offensive line situation. There are so many pass catchers on this team. I don't feel comfortable with Tony Pollard, but I can be talked into him because I did like the talent last year. I did like the opportunity last year.
And Tony Pollard was another guy, like, he was getting drafted last year at, like, the 1-2 turn, and I was very much so out on Tony Pollard at that cost, and I may have kinda, like, stumbled backwards into being right on that take because I shouldn't have been. Like, Tony Pollard on a great offense last year with one of the best weighted opportunity shares in the league. Like, he was getting work on a good offense, and he was injured for half of the season. And then when he wasn't injured, there was just an electric fence at the goal line that he seemingly could not get past. I mean, just had some of the worst touchdown luck we've ever seen. But at the end of the day, he's still pretty young and he's still a talented player. And in the second half of the season, we saw that speed come back and we saw the breakaway runs come back. And I think right now there's just a huge dip in his value because of the recency bias from last year. Like I said, people were drafting him at the 1-2 turn. He burned a lot of people, but again, this is the range where I just love drafting running backs, and he is relatively young and he's got fresh legs, and I like the talent. So right now, he's going in round 8 to 10. Could be the lead back in Tennessee. And not only do I like Tony Pollard, I also like Tajay Spears. It's an ambiguous situation. I'm leaning towards Tony Pollard in my rankings, but I'm also drafting Tajay Spears much later in drafts and doing that happily. So Tony Pollard is just young, talented, all the things we like to see in a running back. I'm willing to go back to the well at a much cheaper cost than last year.
He still just gives me the ick. I don't know. I just don't want to do it.
Last year was rough. Last year
Well,
was rough,
it's
and I
not.
think
It's
that's what it is. Anybody who drafted him heavily last
no,
year will not draft him this year, and I get it.
no, no, it's not that. Because I just preached about learning our lesson of not saying, "Oh, this happened last year. It's going to happen again." It's the reason I get uncomfortable is that Titans offense. I don't think they have an identity. I think they just piecemealed a bunch of parts together. They Frankenstein an offense where they're like, "Yo, we're competing right now," but also our quarterback is Will Levis. And then also we've got 2 running backs that are very interchangeable with very similar skill sets. And the other guy's younger, and that's what worries me about him. I'm not saying you're wrong because I'm 2 spots lower. Like, it's not that crazy. I'm just I get very uncomfortable with Tony Pollard. Now, let's go to 26, where Javonte Williams is the guy that I'm going to say my piece about because I've got him ranked as running back 24. Dave, you got him at 28. And I'm sure you probably have a lot of the same uncomfortability that I had with Pollard, but just with Javonte Williams. And so I get that. I do. I really get that. For me, I like the Bo Nix pick for Javonte Williams. Bo Nix was the guy that had the 3rd lowest depth of target in college football. 30% of his passes were behind the line of scrimmage. That bodes well for a running back. I mean, he was a heavy check down guy in college too. Just take a look at Bucky Irving, right? And I think that Bucky Irving almost got, I don't want to say miscast because he is a good receiving back, but he got miscast a little bit as like just this satellite back that catches passes when he's actually a better runner than he might be receiver.
Mhm.
And a lot of that just had to do with Bo Nix being the guy that's just checking down to running backs constantly. And we saw how valuable Javonte could be when Russell Wilson was checking down to him a lot. Now, I've heard the screams of people, but they drafted Audric Estime. I was never high on Audric Estime. And he goes in the 5th round. He's a guy with a very limited skill set, not very fast. Uh, I get it. There's going to be the truthers out there. I wasn't as high on Audric Estime. I will say I love Jaleel McLaughlin, and I think that he is still going to be very
Oh,
much a
yeah.
part of this offense. And I think that he will get in there. Don't get me wrong. But I think that Audric Estime is kind of more the thunder to McLaughlin's lightning if Javonte is to go down. Javonte is going to be in a contract year. I love betting on running backs when they're in a contract year. And by the way, the name I haven't mentioned yet, Samaje Perine,
Samaje Perine, yep.
I don't
Joey
think he's
Wright
going to
would
be
be
on the team.
furious.
I don't. Joey Wright can get over it because I think Samaje Perine is going to be on a new team, which might be better for him because the Broncos saved $3 million cap by releasing Samaje Perine. A team like the Broncos that has a lot of money issues right now because they're still paying Russell Wilson's salary. So I mean, listen, all the tea leaves to me say Javonte Williams should still be getting a role in this offense. He should still be able to catch passes. I understand the trepidation from people that the offense just might not be good and there might not be a lot of scoring opportunities. But Javonte Williams, let me double check the age here. Okay. Javonte
25, I
Williams
think.
is still 24 years old.
24. Wow.
Last year, he was coming off of a heinous
Brutal.
knee
Like
injury.
everything in his leg. Like,
Brutal.
yeah.
Brutal. We were all avoiding him last year. We talked about avoiding him last year. I'm back in. I'm back in, and especially at the price where I can get him, where I have him ranked as a bottom back end running back 2. Most people have him as a running back 3. Most people have him around that running back 28 to running back 30 range, Dave. So I think that I'm going to get a guy as my running back 3 that gives me tremendous values in drafts.
Yeah, and I think, the concerns about the Denver's Broncos offense as a whole are well warranted. But I think the main concern for me, and again, like we're splitting hairs, we're close, we're
Right.
4 spots off. I mean, basically, we're talking like half a round of value here. But I think the one thing that concerns me is like even last year coming off the injury, Javonte Williams clearly looked like the best running back there, and Sean Payton was still rolling out this maddening three-headed committee where it was Jaleel McLaughlin for one series, and then Samaje Perine for the next series, and then Javonte Williams. And I think Javonte Williams has the things that you want to see in a running back. He's young and he's athletic. I just worry that Sean Payton is going to continue to roll his running backs out in this way. And we saw it last year, like when Javonte Williams got the ball, he was good, but he was just in a three-headed committee, and that's really tough to make sense of in fantasy.
I do tend to believe a lot of that is because of the injury, and a lot of
Yeah,
that is,
I hope.
yeah, I mean, that's what I would assume because Javonte Williams is too good to be keeping in a 3 running back committee, and that's why I'm okay with where I'm drafting him as my running back 3 on most fantasy teams.
We got to
We can
remember
get that
before
we can
the
get that upside.
injury, like after Javante's rookie season, we were talking about him as like the
Top 10.
running back 2, running back 3 in
Yep.
Dynasty. No, like he was going at
Yep.
the 1-2 turn in startups. And then, like you said, this heinous injury really set him back. But this guy's got all the talent and athleticism in the world. And if he can get this injury in the rear view, there's no reason to think that he can't be a phenomenal running back.
This tier finishes up with Brian Robinson Jr. at 27 and Raheem Mostert at 28. Two guys that are going to be working in roles of 2 and 3 running back systems, offenses that Dolphins should remain as good as they were last year. But I think we might see a little less Raheem Mostert, more Devon Achane, more Jalen Wright, who was drafted, and then Brian Robinson is going to be working in a little bit with Austin Eckler, and he's one of those guys that, similar to Javante, could end up being a steal for people because we didn't see the best of Austin Eckler last year. Let's go to our next tier, though. At running back 29, we've got Ezekiel Elliott. At 30, it's Devin Singletary. 31, Zach Moss. 32, Gus Edwards. 33, Jalen Warren. 34, Trey Benson. This is a big tier. 35, Jerome Ford. 36, Tyjae Spears. 37, Austin Eckler. And I'm doing it just because I can. At 38, Jonathan Brooks, because I have him as my running back 32. So just saying. But let's take a look at some of these running backs that we wanted to really point out here. And Dave, you wanted to talk about Ezekiel Elliott right now, who is our consensus running back 29. You've got him at 27. I'm still very low. I've got him at 34. So convince me that I need to push him up because I think I can be swayed.
I think I'm going to keep moving Zeke up. Like I feel like
Oh,
RB27 is too low. I know. I know. It's
so you
really,
got
really gross.
Ezekiel Elliott 2 spots, just to give context. You've got Ezekiel Elliott 2 spots ahead of Raheem Mostert, 1
Mhm,
spot behind Brian Robinson Jr.
mhm.
And then this is what? This is you got him 7 spots ahead of Zach Moss,
Mhm. And I will
and
say
you're moving up.
I'm too low on Zach Moss. I'm going to move Zach
Okay.
Moss up a little bit.
Okay.
But I think Zeke Elliott, like, it wouldn't surprise me by the time like preseason rolls around if I've got Zeke inside my top 20. I'm
You're
just going to
sick.
say it.
You're
I know.
sick.
I know I am.
You're sick. I'm
Ezekiel
gonna
Elliott
vomit.
started last year in a very small sample, week 13 through week 17. Alfredo, let me ask you real quickly. What do you think Ezekiel Elliott ranked as from weeks 13 to 17 when he was starting?
Probably running back. I mean, if you're asking me this, it was probably something ridiculous where he was in the top 12.
He was RB7
Yeah, yeah,
for
and I
like a
get
third of
that
the
because he
season.
was getting all of the touches.
Yeah. And are we concerned about Rico Dowdle and
A
Deuce
little,
Vaughn?
a little, a
I'm not.
little,
I
a
mean, I'm
little.
I'm really not. And then the other, the upside is he was from the Patriots. Like he was the RB7 on a terrible offense last year, and now he goes to the Dallas Cowboys. a team that he's familiar with, a team that is probably going to be a top 3 offense this season. It feels so gross, but man, it's Zeke. Gonna have the star on his jersey, gonna
I
be
don't want to
playing
hear
in
it.
Dallas. He's gonna see a lot of work. Whether we like it or not, Zeke is probably gonna be a pretty good pick in fantasy this year. I know it's gross. I hate to say it, but it's true.
I don't want to hear it. So much of Zeke, and I'm looking at it right now, was
Oh,
he
he's
was
bad.
getting
Don't
this.
look at the efficiency. Don't
No,
look at the
too late. I'm
efficiency.
doing it. Too late.
He's
I'm
bad.
doing it.
He's bad. He's
3.1,
washed.
3.1, 2.3, 2.3, 2.8. Those are all his yards per
Yeah.
carries in those games. But I mean, he's not gonna. He was not a good runner. That was also not a good team. But so much of
But
his
he's also
value is
changed his game.
predicated on targets, right? Like
Yes.
he was used heavily in the passing game last year. I don't know that he gets that same usage in Dallas. If he does, then yeah, I'm obviously I was wrong, and I'll move
Here,
him up.
here's why I think he will. Because at this
Okay.
point in his career, even if he's not a good rusher, he is one of the best pass blocking running backs in the league. Like he is phenomenal as a pass
But you don't
blocker.
catch when you're pass blocking. You maybe get a
But you're
check
on
down.
the field for passing downs, and whether you can just chip a guy and then get out in the flat, or whether they keep you out there just because of your abilities as a pass blocker. This is what we saw with Leonard Fournette for years. Leonard Fournette wasn't the best route runner. He wasn't the best catcher, but he was so good at pass blocking that he was always on the field for passing downs. And sometimes he'd run a route, and he ended up, just stumbling into 4 to 5 targets a game every single season. I think that's kind of where we're at with Zeke at this point in his career. He might not be handling 20 plus carries between the tackles, but he's going to get all of the passing down work, and he's just going to kind of finish the
Ooh, I don't know
season
about that.
probably with 50 to 70 targets. And it is gross, but I think that Zeke on a better offense, little competition, team's going to score a lot. I think Zeke probably back ends his way into a top 20 finish this season.
I
It's
don't
gross.
think Zeke lasts the season.
That's
And I
fair.
think that's just going to be wear and tear. And that's not really analysis. That's just lazy saying he's older and wear and tear. I do think Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn and any other running back on the team does get a little bit of passing work. I just see Zeke and I see what Gus Edwards does. Same thing.
Zeke has missed 4 games in his career to injury. So I get it. Like he's getting old. He's got a lot of mileage, but this dude is an Iron Man. Like he plays through injuries. He had that suspension early in his career. Outside of that, he's missed 4 games to injuries. Like it's crazy how resilient this guy has been in one of the toughest positions to stay healthy. I don't feel good about this. I don't want to be the Zeke guy. Like I really don't want
Too
to be the
late. You
guy
did it. You
10
made
toes
yourself
down
the
for
Zeke
Zeke
guy.
Elliott, but
It's too
I
late. You
the
just said you're
stars
going
are
to put him in your
aligning for a
top
bounce back
20.
season.
You're a
Yeah,
sicko.
yeah, I know. I've been drafting him a lot too. It's gross.
I can't wait to see the comments. By the way, while you were talking, I nearly died. I had a
I
coughing fit
saw
over
that.
here.
I was trying to just, like, keep the conversation
Oh,
going
thanks.
while you got color back in your face.
Yeah, no, I'm tearing up right now. All
Let's
right.
hear about Zach Moss, 'cause I already admitted that I'm too low on him, and I thought I texted you about this after I sent you over my first wave of rankings because Zach Moss is a guy that, I mean, again, projected workload on a good offense, what's not to like?
Yeah, and the thing is that this offense is gonna be good. Like the offense is gonna be pretty good, I think. It's still the Cincinnati Bengals. It's still Joe Burrow. I think we have to toss out a lot of what happened last year. They were able to make Joe Mixon still look good and get Joe Mixon onto the Texans and have the Texans say, you know what, that's our guy. Joe Mixon, by all means, has been pretty average over the last few years. A guy that the efficiency has been waning and waning, just kind of like Josh Jacobs. But now he's on a good offense. And so Zach Moss is, I think, a guy like, listen, he is not stellar by any means. And we could all just be getting Alexander Madison here. Like it is very possible. The difference is the price tag here, where he's going as a very distinct running back 3. I've got him at running back 29. Dave, you had him at running back 24, but I know you said you're moving him up. I'll be curious to see where you think you're going to have him. But when Zach Moss was getting opportunity last year, I mean, let me just list to you his starts. Running back 10, and this is a half PPR, by the way. Running back 10, running back 4, running back 21, running back 2, running back 9, RB 30, RB 14. And those were the games where he was starting. It's just
Yeah.
he was a capable starting running back. And all those years in the Bills, listen, Bills, it might have just been you. Devin Singletary went to the Texans and he
Mhm.
started. And now he's getting another contract with Brian Dable. And something that I love that was pointed out by Scott Barrett over at Fantasy Points, credit to him. The Bengals ran the highest percentage of plays from shotgun in 11 personnel. 11 personnel meaning one running back, one tight end. So they spread out the field with more wide receivers. That's what the Bengals do. They went and drafted Jermaine Burton, who's going to take over that Tyler Boyd role, spread out the field. Zach Moss had the second highest yards per carry from that formation, that 11 personnel. Second highest yards per carry from that formation in the NFL. This is a guy who is tailor-made for this offense, and it really appears that the Bengals went and got a guy that fits what they want to do. And they did it at a discount, which to me is really smart because the Bengals need to spend money elsewhere. They need to pay T. Higgins. They need to keep investing in offensive line and defensive players and make sure everyone gets paid. So, Zach Moss, I truly think they are just going to run him into the ground this season as much as they can.
And I love Chase Brown. I just want to put a little honorable
He's
mention
good.
here as like
He's
a
solid.
very late round guy, because Chase Brown can do all the things that Zach Moss can't do, the big breakaway runs and all that. But again, we're really talking about a lot of guys. I've changed my philosophy on running backs so much because in previous years it was like relative athletic score and spark scores, and this guy's all juiced up and
Did you
athletic and
always
he's
say
going
it
to
in
get his
that voice?
opportunity. Well, it's just that never happens. The guys that we wish cast to get big roles because they're athletic typically don't get that. It's these guys that can grind out hard yards. They are the guys that end up finishing well in fantasy, whether we want it to or not. You're probably going to know where I'm going with this, Alfredo, but you know who was pretty inefficient last year? You know who didn't look good on tape? You know who had a terrible analytical profile and finished as the RB6? Joe Mixon.
Ruh-roh. Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
Zach Moss, he doesn't have to be that good. He doesn't need to be an analytics darling. He doesn't need to be hyper athletic. He's probably going to get work on a good offense. And if he gets the same workload that Joe Mixon does, even if he's not that good at it, he's still going to produce in fantasy. That's why I said I'm too low on Zach Moss, because I started working through projections and I was just like, wow, Chase Brown's not getting 15, 20 touches a game. And these touches have to go somewhere. And they brought in Zach Moss. And Zach Moss can do all the things that Joe Mixon can do. And again, let's like call this tier like just the gross volume tier. Ezekiel Elliott, Zach Moss. Like these
Gus
aren't good
Edwards.
players.
Yep.
Yeah, but they're going to get work, and I'm willing to draft them at cost.
There's one final player here that I want to talk about. I mean, I mentioned the rookies that are on here. We mentioned Gus Edwards, but there's one final player on here that could end up being just a really sneaky player to draft this late, and it's Jerome Ford, who we have as running back 35. I've got him at 37. You've got him at 33, so he averages out to 35 there. This Browns running back situation is very interesting because we have no idea what's going to happen here with Nick Chubb. But the Browns, I don't know if we're reading the tea leaves here, man. Like they seem super confident. They have not gone out and signed any more running backs. So is this confidence in Nick Chubb, or is this confidence that hey, Jerome Ford is good enough to just keep doing what he was doing?
I think Deonta Foreman is kind of the forgotten man.
It's
Like
true.
it
Good
seems like
job.
it's been like 4 straight years now where we're just like, oh, Deonta Foreman, he's not going to do anything, and then he gets his opportunity and just like rumbles for 100 yards every single time he starts. I like Jerome Ford a lot. I know you're a huge Jerome Ford fan. The two guys that I drafted, or the three guys I drafted, like that I was just pounding the table for last year, were Zamir White, Jerome Ford, and Ty Chandler, and all three of them broke out in a huge way at the end of the season, and I love to see it. I just don't know what we're going to expect this year between Jerome Ford and Deonta Foreman. I think Deonta Foreman really fits what they want to do with Nick Chubb, which is just pound the ball in between the tackles. So I'm okay drafting Jerome Ford where he's going. But one of my favorite picks in best ball, again, I keep going back to the drafts that I've been doing this year. Deonta Foreman in round 18, this is a very ambiguous situation. And I
Yeah.
think that I'm willing to just defer to the cheaper option. And you can get Deonta Foreman essentially for free right now.
See, I'm glad I asked you this. The Deontay Foreman reminder was what I needed. I totally forgot he was there. So Jerome Ford will be sliding down from 37. He'll go a little bit lower for me because I can put Trey Benson ahead of Jerome Ford. Like there's quite a few guys I can get there way ahead
What
of
also
Jerome
scares
Ford
me
now.
off with the Browns running backs a little bit, like I don't expect Nick Chubb to come back, but he is a freak athlete, and his injury happened
Yeah.
early in the season. So you might draft Jerome Ford or Deonta Foreman, one of these guys, and feel good about it. Then all of a sudden, week 10 rolls around, Nick Chubb comes back, and then we're looking at this three-headed, disgusting committee. None of these guys are worth any value, and those are when fantasy matchups matter the most, down the stretch when you're heading into your playoffs, and then we might not have any clear read on what the Browns backfield looks like.
Last guy here, and then we'll close up shop. But Jonathan Brooks is my running back 32. He's the rookie running back for the Panthers. He was the first rookie running back drafted in the NFL draft. I might be pushing him up. I see that the Panthers, just as we're recording, just signed Rashad Penny.
Oh,
So I,
a
I
new
think,
top 20 running back has entered the
yeah,
conversation.
wheels up, keep pounding.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm pretty high on Jonathan Brooks, and I could even be pushing him up where I think that he could be in that running back 31 range, 30 range. I've got him at 32. I could keep pushing him up a little bit further and further, especially if he's going to be the starter for Carolina. I think we see Miles Sanders possibly get dealt here. Dave, you've got him very, very low, which is why he did not make our rankings here. I think I'm putting you on the spot here, but what was the reasoning for having Jonathan Brooks? That was it mostly just like the injury, and you want to wait and see what
Solely
happens?
it. Solely it.
Yeah,
And he's a guy that I'm okay drafting right now. And what I just said about the Cleveland Browns, why I'm a little bit apprehensive about Jerome Ford and Deonta Foreman, because how they can lose their value late in the season. On the
right.
complete opposite end of the spectrum, you got Jonathan Brooks, who might not do anything to start the season, but could be fully up to speed when it matters most. So he's a guy that I've been drafting pretty aggressively in best ball. Because you need the high end range of outcomes and you really want the guys that are going to perform well down the stretch. But as far as redraft, he's not a guy, if I was doing redraft right now, that I'd be extremely comfortable drafting. But we know the story with Jonathan Brooks, right? Like all it's going to take is one social media highlight. The Panthers are going to
Yep.
tweet out a video. We're going to see Jonathan Brooks cut in front of a cone, and everyone's going to say, "Oh my goodness!" And he's going to shoot up and be, probably a top 20, top 24 running back. But I just need to see it before I'm willing to place him that high in my redraft rankings.
All right. Well, there you have it. Our top 38 running backs for fantasy football and for best ball, and and all that. And it's very early in the process. This is going to be changing as we go throughout the summer. For me, it's already changed from one week to the next, so this will continue to move and be very fluid. We'll be
I
doing
just
more of
moved
these
Zach
as the
Moss
summer.
up in the 40 minutes we were talking about running backs.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go. And we're going
The
to continue to do more
living,
of these.
breathing document of rankings.
Yes. Yes. Which means you've got to keep coming back for more. You've got to keep coming back, watching these videos on YouTube, listening to these podcast episodes, because we're going to continue to change these rankings and give you the explanation as to why. This is our job. We are in the know. We are doing nothing but studying these players, studying reports, making sure we're keeping up with all the latest data. Now, if you want to make sure that you're up to date on everything, just be sure to subscribe to the daily news updates from Football Guys. We're going to put that link in the description of the podcast and in the comments down below here on YouTube. Everything you need to win in fantasy football sent straight to you every day by the man himself, Joe Bryant, here at Football Guys. Now, I want to thank you guys for watching or listening all the way through here. We'll see you next time. Adios.